Welcome to Making Moves, where each week myself, Ross Hastings, and Kieran Antill discuss one company in the world from that week who is repositioning for growth. Always selected from a couple of options provided by our team at very short notice. Always unedited, always unscripted, and always, where possible, in under 15 minutes, sometimes a smidgen over. And because of those conditions, always with some sort of sippable stimulation. So what are you sipping on this week, Kieran, to get the cognitive juices flowing?
I went for the thing that looked like it was going to shock me alive the most, which is
amino energy. Oh, I've considered that a couple of times for this.
I went with watermelon.
Terrible flavor choice. Terrible flavor choice.
Really, in contrast, I've got this sort of little girl watermelon flavor and big masculine typography. So I'm very confused.
Well, I have gone for Shine Charged.
Shine Charged. That's brewed in Manly, I believe. Or
brewed where? Manly. Oh, there we go. They are on a mission to rid the world of bad energy. And this will help charge my performance and energize my mind. So let's see. Because today we're going to be talking about McKinsey. This is interesting for a number of reasons.
They're Scottish?
Are they Scottish?
Well, the Mick is what gives...
Okay. Okay, McDonald's as well, I guess. I did find out the other day that the Scots invented the Australian national anthem, but we won't go down. Go down that route. McKinsey's interesting for many reasons, not least of which the curious similarity to Nilo's own brand platform, Make Your Move.
I told you we shouldn't put it on the internet.
McKinsey been watching us for years. Anyway, so they've gone with what's your next brilliant move, and announced. I don't know if it was the exclusive announcement, but certainly prominently announced at Cannes. So, why don't you take us away? What are your thoughts?
Well, I guess we should just talk about that choice of it in Cannes. I mean, McKinsey's obviously, a bit of a behemoth. I think they're more of their reputation is driven by other things than advertising per se. I think the people at Cannes or people who are looking to attend sporadically care about Cannes if they have something that they're talking to or submitting, but the rest of the world couldn't give a shit. And I don't think that the most people of the McKinsey client base or potential client base or people employed at McKinsey would care either. Because I don't really think it's their heartland. Obviously, there's sort of been changes with the likes of Accenture and Deloitte and that have sort of moved into sort of advertising network areas of creativity. But I think more than anything, this is a signal of, maybe that was a big mistake. Maybe the area that we're in owning strategic decision-making, or I should say critical decision-making, is really the future. And, I think that's what they're trying to re-signal here.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is firstly, for context, it's the first time they've ever had a, call it, above-the-line brand platform idea, right? Like a stated brand platform. Of course, you've always got your kind of positioning, your proposition, and the message that your partners are taking out in the world, which of course is a brand platform. But this is, in traditional sense, their first ever. But I don't expect it's going to change their model that much in terms of their partners are still going to be heavily incentivized to bring network and BD and growth. They're still going to get most of their work through word of mouth and the strength of their 100+ year brand. So the question becomes, do they really expect this brand platform and let's call it advertising to drive growth? And if not, then what is the angle? And I think a lot of it is just broad broader brand perception of McKinsey, and that could be to reposition them potentially with the regulators, maybe. But one interesting angle is whether it's repositioning them in the labor market. I wonder whether there is some talent shortages with McKinsey. I wonder whether the stated intention is that they want to move more from kind of strategy house to transformation partner, and they're in a space where the big four are shifting and getting more in that space. You've obviously got more traditional kind of BCG, etc., as competitors as well. So are they trying to get more kind of long-term transformation retainer partnerships, that type engagements? Are they trying to get more fresh and new talent through the door? Or, to your point, is it because they see the strategy space shifting with prominent narratives from the likes of Roger Martin about how strategy needs to be more creative and needs to be rethought in terms of the type of decision-making that's driving strategy? It's curious. It's interesting to think about what's driven this.
Yeah, I mean, I like the word brilliance for them in there. Will it work? I don't know. It right now, from what I've seen, it's just another corporate video of nonsense, of just blah 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 blah. Well, I mean, it is, and no disrespect to anyone behind that, because you're trying to represent so many different things. You end up kind of saying the world is blue, and then it's blah, and shaping, and it's round, and we're brilliant. Like, you end up sort of saying nothing, because it's not. They need to represent so many different industries and wider kinds of things. But I like that thought that really it is about who works at McKinsey, because that is why you supposedly hire them. It's who those people are, who those thinkers are, the way they do things, and the way that someone is pretty smart if they're working at NASA. If you're McKinsey, you want to kind of hold those areas. The reality is not everyone at McKinsey is that at all, and in many ways void of creative thinking, largely because of the big behemoth that it can be. That's not to discredit, a lot of the how do I back myself out of this? I'm not basically saying that everyone when McKinsey represents that, but I do think that that's ultimately what they would try and sort of own. But this is exactly what any consultancy would be trying to say. The way they are talking about that is, of course, your brilliant move. So it is, of course, not we are brilliant, which is probably where they sit at the moment. Aren't we smart? I think it is a bit more like this is about your brilliant move, whatever company you're doing, and so it's really pandering a little bit to the client. But I don't find there's anything particularly original about it at the moment. I would
definitely not. It's Neela famously went with "Make Your Move" months ago.
Exactly, but if they execute it, they've certainly got the weight behind it to do something more interesting than just do a video and at the end happen to have a line.
Well, it's interesting here. I'm just looking at their new website. What's your next brilliant move? I think next is interesting, right? Because it's assuming, like, it's implying that you've made brilliant moves before, which again is kind of making the client the spotlight sort of thing. But game-changing work, people and AI powering growth. At McKinsey, we help you think bigger, build stronger, and expand opportunity for all. So, one thing is maybe their assumption is strategy, kind of the multi-million-dollar reports that they've been doing for years can now be commoditized, and at least have its value lowered by AI. So maybe their bet is where the value is going to remain is, to your point, the creative decision-making that can be made with that insight and with that data. So I wonder whether they'll probably end up trying to own the tech stack, but they're really positioning themselves as what's the brilliant decision you're going to make that sits on top of that. I mean, it sounds very IDEO-esque, right? It's moving more into that kind of creative innovation sort of space.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I just don't think their DNA is creativity. DNA is very Data, for sure. And when we say creativity, I don't mean creative ads. I mean creative solving, ideo, design thinking, thinking differently. In many ways, McKinsey is by reputation, the blue suit.
For sure, but I mean, they're trying to signal the otherwise, both with their content and the channel through which they chose to launch it. Right, to your point, by doing it at Cannes, it's less about their specific clients being there or that being their kind of normal stomping ground, and more them saying, "Yeah, we're more creative now. Look, we're announcing this at Cannes."
Yeah, I mean, I think this is all in the context, and what's shaping a lot of the Cannes conversations at the moment is of course AI and the focus on what does that mean for creative generation or other things, but really AI is going to be more revolutionary in operations and critical decision making. I think roles of consultancies, roles of agencies, roles of anyone in those trusted advisory roles partnering with a client is going, the value is still in, I can do so many more things now, or certainly I'm working under the umbrella that it is assumed that I can do a lot more things with AI, whatever industry you're in. Who's going to help me make that decision? And what is the value of that critical decision? Because you can't do it all. Even if you could create it all, you can't do it all. You still only have so many channels, and you can only own one area in the market that you're kind of aiming for. So how are you going to make that decision? And those decisions are really where the value is.
But I like this general kind of heuristic that a lot of the big consultancies are moving towards around bold move, making moves. They're obviously playing the top end of town, but they're pushing back on this kind of status quo, like incumbent staleness sort of stuff. Your next brilliant move, IDO, we envisage new businesses and brands. We design the experiences that bring them to life, build your next era of growth. Like you said, I think Deloitte play around in that idea of together make progress. I like this idea that everything is clearly moving towards making decisions, not sticking with non-decisions, and I think it speaks to the disruption that's happening probably at a scale that's never been seen before, with challenger brands coming up and being able to do more with less, powered by AI, yada, yada, yada. Perhaps the top end of town is taking note, and I don't think that's a bad thing in terms of innovation across and competitiveness across the corporate world.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how we're running on time here, but I will say that the
minute and a half.
The world is moving, regardless of whether it is or it isn't or whatever. But the perception certainly is the world is moving. So in that strange way, it's like, yes, it's a bit of a hint that consultancies, agencies, but obviously reading that landscape at large, is you have to make decisions because the world's changing around you. So you can't stay the status quo because, well, status quo is no longer fit for purpose. And so, the proposition to say we're going to help you make those things and they're going to be brilliant moves, it works. But I don't know. I don't see anything revolutionary, interesting here. Maybe that is exactly the right thing they should be doing. So it's not a criticism of the work or even the positioning, as much as I feel like people have been saying this sort of stuff for a long time, and it's difficult for them to have a very contrarian point of view and still be McKinsey.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that stands out so far, right? Is they've literally got a new headline on their website and the brand platform that they've announced. Doesn't seem like on the surface level that anything else has changed. And it'll be interesting to see whether, they're promoting new people to partner, whether they're getting new type of talent in, whether they're actually changing anything. Obviously we'll never really see that, but I am curious as to whether it's simply a line or actually a repositioning. Yes. Anyway, that is time. That's it for another week.
Energized.
Cheers.